Chapter 585. The Demon King of Incarceration 5. He didn't die even if he was killed. Eugene had encountered many such cases throughout the centuries. Even middle-ranking demons possessed some trivial form of immortality, and high-ranking demons were even harder to kill. And when it came to a demon king, one might even wonder if such a bastard could even truly die. But if one kept killing them, they could eventually be killed. Eugene had killed multiple enemies time and again. The Demon King of Carnage, the Demon King of Cruelty, the Demon King of Fury, and in this life, Raizakia, Iris, Gavid Lindman, and even Norgiabella. He had managed to kill them all. But now, with the Demon King of Incarceration. Shit, Eugene cursed. The Demon King's response held not an ounce of falsehood. In fact, there hadn't even been a need to hear it out loud. Eugene could instinctively feel it. The divine sword had penetrated the body of the Demon King of Incarceration, but it could not advance any further. From it he could feel that he could never end the Demon King of Incarceration's life. Time and again, even if he slashed dozens, hundreds, or thousands of times, the Demon King of Incarceration could not be killed. This dreadful immortality was like a curse for the Demon King of Incarceration. No matter how many times Eugene attacked, the Demon King of Incarceration would not perish. No, Eugene thought. That could not be true. Even if he was cursed with immortality, if Eugene could attack with enough power to overwhelm the curse, the Demon King of Incarceration could be killed. Eugene steadied his wavering heart. Such chaos would only breed despair, and Eugene had no intention of falling into despair. Vermouth could not kill the Demon King of Incarceration, as it was impossible to kill him with the powers of destruction. But Eugene wasn't using the powers of destruction now. He had intentionally refrained from using the power of the Moonlight Sword. Whoosh! The divine sword's flame blazed fiercely. Despite the fire raging over the sword piercing his body, the Demon King of Incarceration was unfazed. Instead, he was still smiling as he reached out toward Eugene. "Do you have no thoughts of giving up?" he asked. Dark power covered Eugene's view. At the same time, the feathers of prominence glowed. Then, just as the dark power caused a loud explosion, Eugene grabbed Molan and leaped backward. Ugh! Molan regained consciousness and moaned slightly. As he wiped his bloodied lips and stood up, he asked, "Did I fail?" "No, I failed," Eugene responded. Eugene had hoped that by risking his own life, Molan would hold on to the Demon King of Incarceration and create an opening. And Molan had done so perfectly without hesitation, but it was Eugene's attack that had failed to wound the Demon King of Incarceration. Eugene flexed his sore hand and glared at the Demon King. The divine sword still embedded in his body continued to burn, but the fire was extinguished the moment the Demon King of Incarceration took a step. Clank! The chains rattled. Then the Demon King of Incarceration casually cracked his neck, and his wounded body was seamlessly rejoined, and he was whole again. His smirk was gone, replaced by a calm expression. Both Eugene and Molan felt chills run down their backs. This was the great Demon King. Even his presence was different. Just standing before him made one feel like they were being crushed by the pressure. Eugene and Molan shared a glance. Pfft! They burst into laughter, not knowing who started it. They couldn't help it either. It had been 300 years since they had fought together. Who would have thought that after 300 years, they would find themselves in such a situation, feeling this way? Anise looked aghast as she stared at the two of them. Sienna let out a deep sigh and shook her head. Only Christina seemed puzzled. She couldn't share in the sentiment and wasn't sure why they were laughing at such a critical time. "Christina, from now on, you will need to concentrate even more," Anise warned immediately. "Yes," Christina responded. Anise explained, "In the past, Sir Vermouth would have taken control and coordinated the battle. But now, since Sir Vermouth is not here..." "Sister, what do you mean?" Christina was still confused. "Those two are perfectly in sync in battle," Anise said with a sigh. "From now on they will fight without regard for injuries." "What?" Christina asked, shocked. "They will know they are on the verge of death, yet they will charge in any way. However, it's fortunate, really. 300 years ago I had to keep those idiots from dying all by myself. Now at least I have your help, Christina," Anise said, sounding annoyed. While the saints conversed, Eugene and Molan's stances lowered to the ground. In Eugene's hands were two divine swords, but Molan was unarmed. His axe had been thrown away earlier. Puff! Amidst a crimson explosion, prominence scattered flames. Thousands of sparks, like hidden weapons, bombarded the Demon King of Incarceration. Some of these sparks became stepping stones, and Eugene became a streak of lightning as he pierced through the flames. The two swords moved with their own rhythm. The Demon King of Incarceration didn't bother to track the trajectory of the blades. Crush. The blades were flung upwards, causing the space around them to tremble. The flurry of high-speed slashes was invisible to the eye. Instead of retracting his fist, the Demon King straightened his knees. His foot shot out like a spear. With a heavy impact, Molin's arm was ripped off and flew away. Although he had lost his arm in an instant, Molin burrowed further toward the Demon King of Incarceration without even a tiny groan. Light flashed from Anise and Christina. Molin's severed arm was instantly clasped by the light and became reattached to Molin. Flesh and bone were rapidly regenerated. Molin curled his hand to form a fist. The Demon King of Incarceration was using both hands to block the barrage of Eugene's dual swords. His leg, which he had used to kick away Molin's arm, remained raised. Without hesitation, Molin threw a punch towards that knee. Prick. The Demon King's foot moved as fast as lightning and struck Molin's jaw. Such a blow could have easily snapped his neck and burst his head, but none of that happened. Molin's will denied death, his body obeyed his will, and the divine power he had acquired as Eugene's holy knight also responded to his resolve. Yet the shock from the blow knocked Molin unconscious. Although he had briefly lost consciousness, his body did not stop. Crush. His fist continued onwards and finally pushed the Demon King of Incarceration back. Crunch. For the first time, blood started to flow from the mouth of the Demon King of Incarceration. He chuckled at the unbelievable strength and weight contained in the blow. Indeed, he remarked. The comrades that Vermouth chose 300 years ago were all special. Hamel was special naturally, but so were Anise, Sienna, and Molin. All of their existences were miracles. Among them, Molin was born with a strength that could be considered supreme among all beings. Unfortunately, being born a human proved to be Molin's only limitation. A human body could not handle the power Molin was born with. If Molin had been born a giant, he would have long reached a strength that could crush even a demon king. The stature of the greatest warrior suits the power you were born with. Your body is managing to handle the power you have, commented the Demon King. The blessings of the saints illuminated his consciousness. With a tingling zap, Molin's consciousness returned. Despite having briefly passed out, Molin did not hesitate. He roared like a beast and stomped against the ground. His fist had made contact. The sensation of impact still lingered in his fist. Rumble. The axe that had flown into the darkness returned, tearing through dark power as it heeded Molin's call. Molin grasped the returning axe with both hands. Eugene transformed the tattered dual swords into flames. The fire blazed once more before morphing into a massive hammer. Eugene and Molin swung the hammer and axe simultaneously. Their weapons gained tremendous force and swung toward the Demon King of Incarceration with incredible momentum. Creak. The chains connected to the Demon King's back plunged into space, anchoring his existence. Then he raised both arms and thrust them forward. The duo's attack did not push the Demon King back, but the dark power permeating the hall dissipated. The light summoned by the saints' prayers illuminated the hall. Simultaneously, Sienna's magic, empowered by Mary and infused into the demon eye of fantasy, transformed reality. It altered the space where the chains had anchored, and the Demon King of Incarceration exclaimed in shock. The spatial shift caused the chains to slacken. The axe and hammer struck once again before the Demon King could react and re-anchor his existence with his chains. Boom! The Demon King of Incarceration was sent flying. He spat blood while his eyes glimmered. Eugene dropped the hammer and seized a spear with both hands. Molin raised his axe above his head. The living chains moved like snakes toward the Demon King of Incarceration. He isn't truly immortal, Eugene thought. If he were truly undying, there'd be no need for him to block these attacks. Yet the Demon King of Incarceration continued to parry. Was it possible to kill him? Or perhaps... The chains, Eugene observed. Eugene saw the numerous chains linked to the Demon King. From the memories he saw from 300 years ago, he remembered that Vermouth, who couldn't kill the Demon King of Incarceration, had threatened to sever the chains of the Demon King to pressure him. That suggested that breaking these chains was unwelcome to the Demon King. Have they diminished by a little? Eugene suddenly realized. The attacks had been significant. It was still hard to imagine killing the Demon King of Incarceration, but Eugene didn't think the past attacks had been in vain. The axe was the first to strike down from high. The strike contained enough force to completely sever even space. Ahaha. As the Demon King moved to counter, he heard a laugh. He saw a faint presence by the side of the powerful attack. At the same time, the world seemed to stop. Or rather, it felt as if it had paused. He had been encroached by an illusion upon encountering the presence. Noir Giabella. In the world that had seemingly paused, the Demon King of Incarceration spoke. He chuckled and looked back. He saw his own form, arms raised toward the axe. His body and mind had been separated. The Demon King of Incarceration laughed again. You should be dead. What lingering attachment keeps you in this world? He asked. I felt no such attachment. I died extremely satisfied. My death held no regrets. Noir chuckled and lay back in the sky. She propped her chin with one hand as she looked down at the Demon King of Incarceration before continuing. I'm only like this due to the nasty old witch's spite. Really, there's a line not to cross even when you desecrate the dead. If you dislike your current situation, I could take you in. How about it? Suggested the Demon King of Incarceration. Quite a kind offer, but I'll decline. Things have already turned out this way, and I hope to see Hamel survive. I want him to fulfill his desires, to triumph over you, Noir said firmly. Do you think that's possible? The Demon King of Incarceration asked with a smile. Noir's smile faltered slightly. The Demon King continued, You've looked into my abyss along with Sienna Meridian. Thus you should know. Your abyss was... After a short sigh, Noir shook her head. Unexpected. It was really unexpected. No, rather no one could have imagined it. The demon eye of fantasy succeeded in disturbing the Demon King of Incarceration. The great Demon King, who had lived through an eternity, now had his deepest trauma revealed and displayed through illusion. The fact that he did not feel fear at his own trauma was not in itself surprising. Just as Noir had never imagined her own death until the end, she couldn't possibly imagine the Demon King feeling fear. A slight disturbance, that's all. He thought that was enough. But Noir felt an even greater disturbance than what the Demon King of Incarceration had felt. The Demon King's abyss was profound, and the darkness at its bottom was dense. He had despaired to the point where despair itself had become his companion. Could she truly grasp victory against this great Demon King who had lived through eons of time? Do you pity me? The Demon King of Incarceration asked with a smile. Noir delayed her response, her eyes clouded with complex emotions. Soon she shook her head along with a short sigh. No, Demon King of Incarceration. To pity you would be an insult. I do not pity you. Instead, I feel awe, Noir said honestly. It was true. Noir had never sincerely felt awe towards the Demon King of Incarceration in her life, but after having glimpsed into his abyss, she could not help but feel it now. Awe, you say, the Demon King of Incarceration said with a soft chuckle and closed his eyes. As time resumed, his consciousness reunited with his body. Then Molin's axe struck down upon the Demon King. Crack. With a horrific sound, the Demon King's body snapped. Unable to withstand the force, his knees buckled. He narrowly avoided a fatal blow to the head, but Molin's axe tore through the Demon King's left shoulder and cleaved down to his waist, splitting him for the first time. Following that, Eugene stabbed with his spear. With a shockwave, the spear's tip pierced the Demon King's chest. Whoosh! Blood spurted from the wound along with dark power. Ha! The Demon King of Incarceration exhaled deeply. Blood flowed from his lips, staining his chin and chest red. The spear lodged in his chest, twisted and broke his ribs. With each turn, the divine fire ignited from within, starting to consume the Demon King from the core. Let me ask again, said the Demon King. His lower half had been severed by the axe and he had collapsed. His tattered upper body, impaled and burning, continued to bleed, but there was no sign of agony on the Demon King's face. Calmly, with sunken eyes, he stared at Eugene. Have you no thoughts of surrender? He asked. It was an out-of-place remark under the circumstances. Or perhaps of ending your own life? He questioned. Amidst the divine fire, the Demon King of Incarceration asked as the chains rattled in the intensifying flames. Go to hell, Eugene spat back without releasing his spear. To that, the Demon King smiled bitterly. Pity, he declared, then closed his eyes. The world was enveloped in darkness. Chapter 586. The Demon King of Incarceration, 7. What the? Eugene thought in surprise. His vision was engulfed in darkness. Startled, Eugene leaped backward. The darkness was so thick that he couldn't even make out his own body, let alone the figures of Molin, Sienna, and the two saints. The first thing that immediately came to mind was Balzac's signature spell, Blind. Balzac may have died in a vain attempt to defeat Sienna, but his soul hadn't been erased by her and had instead been retrieved by the Demon King of Incarceration. Because of that, if he really wanted to, the Demon King of Incarceration should have enough knowledge to reproduce Balzac's signature adequately. But was that really the case? Eugene first settled his nerves. This darkness was something different from blind. It wasn't some type of spell that blocked the five senses, but was something much simpler than that, something that couldn't really be described as a spell or an ability. It was simply dark power. But the nature of this dark power, which the Demon King of Incarceration had previously kept under control and allowed to permeate his entire palace, had undergone a change. The dark power had become extremely thick, dense, and concentrated, so much so that it had even corrupted the space around them, transforming it into a separate world. This absurdly dense and concentrated dark power was even able to extinguish and erase the light of divinity that Eugene had been flaring. By sanctuary, Eugene thought in concern. It had yet to collapse. The sanctuary had been maintained because Eugene's presence was still present. However, the dark power that was now covering everything outside of his sanctuary was capable of completely suppressing any of the benefits that the sanctuary had once granted Eugene. Eugene closed his eyes and sharpened his senses. His aim was to see if he could confirm the status of his comrades. However, his search failed. While it was understandable that he would fail to sense Sienna, Eugene became more than a little flustered by the fact he wasn't able to sense Molin, Anise, or Christina either. The latter two were both Eugene's incarnations and his saints. Yet despite that, he still couldn't feel them. It was as if the very laws of the world had been subverted. He had never been so completely constrained, not even when he had entered the nightmare within Giabella City, but this darkness, it had left Eugene completely isolated. Step. He could hear footsteps. Startled, Eugene turned to look in the direction of the sound. Though he was surrounded by a darkness so thick that he couldn't even see his own body, Eugene felt reassured that he could at least still feel the grip of his sword in his hand. "Who is it?" Eugene cautiously asked. Could have been Molin or Sienna or maybe even one of the saints. As he couldn't see, Eugene needed to carefully judge the other person's identity before swinging his sword at them. However, the person that had appeared in front of him wasn't one of his comrades. It was the Demon King of Incarceration. However, something was different about him. The Demon King of Incarceration, who arrived with the sound of footsteps, looked much different from the one Eugene had seen earlier. Perhaps the biggest difference was that the Demon King looked much younger. Other than that, the atmosphere that Incarceration gave off was also very different. Despite his younger appearance, this Demon King of Incarceration didn't give off any of the spirit or passion that came with youth. That said, he also didn't have that same air of boredom that clung to this era's Demon King of Incarceration. From this young-looking Demon King of Incarceration, the only thing that Eugene could sense was terrible despair. Although he wasn't covered in blood or wounds, it felt as if this Demon King of Incarceration might collapse at any moment and break into wailing sobs. Eugene couldn't imagine that the Demon King of Incarceration he had become so familiar with would ever show such depths of emotions. It had to be because, in the first place, this person was a completely different type of being from the Demon King of Incarceration that Eugene knew. Eugene could feel it. The sensations were startlingly clear. Emotions that didn't belong to Eugene were rushing into his mind as if being fed through pipes connected directly to his brain. There was a terrible and overwhelming amount of despair, rage, loss, and also betrayal. Eugene thought cautiously. He felt dizzy from the emotions flooding into his mind. His legs, which were still invisible due to being engulfed in darkness, staggered, and he was barely able to keep his balance. It was difficult for Eugene to understand or even accept the burden of all these emotions because he didn't know why he was experiencing these emotions in the first place. What was clear was that all of this despair, rage, and loss were born from a great betrayal. But in that case, what kind of betrayal could have caused Incarceration to feel such great surges of emotion? Who on earth would even be in a position to betray the Demon King of Incarceration? Eugene lifted his head to stare at the Demon King of Incarceration once more. The Demon King of Incarceration slowly walked closer to Eugene, but his gaze wasn't directed at him. In the end, this figure was nothing more than a remnant of Incarceration's memories that was embedded in this dense cloud of dark power. The Demon King of Incarceration had somehow dragged Eugene into his consciousness using his chains, and he had locked Eugene into his subconscious mind, trapping him within this terrible abyss of dark power. Eugene blindly grabbed at the side of his own head in pain. This figure might have just been a remnant of Incarceration's distant past, but Eugene had been able to glean something from it. Even though it was simply a remnant of a memory that had been imbued with dark power, Eugene noticed that the Demon King of Incarceration from that period of time hadn't given off the sensation of possessing dark power. But how could that be possible? Eugene couldn't believe what he had discovered. There was a simple reason why he hadn't been able to sense any dark power from that memory. It meant that the Demon King of Incarceration of that time hadn't been a Demon King. "I don't miss that period of time," a voice said, accompanied by the clanking sound of chains. Eugene turned his head in surprise. The current Demon King of Incarceration was now standing right next to Eugene. "Everyone has memories that they would rather not remember. Isn't that so?" The Demon King of Incarceration said as he looked at the phantom from his distant past. "The same also applies to me. I don't want to remember any of these memories. That period of time holds no value for me to recall. As such, I have buried these memories here deep down in my mind with everything else that I don't have a use for." Eugene hesitantly spoke. "However, there are times when they do become necessary. When I no longer have the will to do all this. When I just want to abandon everything and quit. At those times I take out these memories and look at them," the Demon King of Incarceration said with a wry grin as he shook his head. "All thoughts of wanting to quit get completely erased. I tell myself that I can do it, that I have to do it. It is what gives me motivation." Eugene glared at the Demon King of Incarceration, unable to say anything in response. He didn't feel all that weirded out by Incarceration's admission that his motivation was born from his feelings of betrayal. This was because Eugene himself was familiar with drawing on the spite that came from such negative emotions for strength. "Just what on earth is going on?" Eugene finally couldn't help but ask. However, this time, it was the Demon King of Incarceration who fell into silence. "Why do I get the feeling of divine power from the you from back then?" Eugene pressed for an answer despite the continued silence. Eugene couldn't help but feel greatly shaken by the shocking revelation that he couldn't sense any dark power within the Demon King of Incarceration from the distant past. Instead, what he felt from that figure was an abundant source of divine power. This was completely absurd. It was extremely hard for Eugene to accept it. How could a Demon King have anything to do with divine power? Moreover, that divine power wasn't something on the level of an ordinary power. That divine power could have belonged to a saint. Or perhaps even an incarnation. Eugene swallowed a gulp as he glared at the Demon King of Incarceration. Having noticed that divine power, Eugene was now able to sense something other than the dark power infused into this world of darkness he was currently trapped in. It felt as if there was divine power fused with the dark power. The silence ended. "At that time I wasn't a Demon King," the Demon King of Incarceration admitted with a bitter smile. "I was the hero." "What?" Eugene blurted out in disbelief. "I said that I was the hero," the Demon King of Incarceration repeated himself as he raised his head. In this cloud of darkness, there was no way to see the sky or the ceiling. There was only a pitch-black darkness wherever you looked. While staring into this darkness, the Demon King of Incarceration continued speaking. "I did the exact same thing that you, Anne Vermouth, did. I wanted something similar to what you desire. To defeat the Demon King and to save the world." Eugene listened silently. "At the very end I managed to succeed only to be met by failure. I defeated the Demon King as I had hoped, but I was betrayed by the comrades who had accompanied me up until that point. Some fell for the temptations offered by the dying Demon King. Some lost their minds due to the Demon King's curse. And some..." The Demon King of Incarceration closed his eyes as he paused for a moment. "My dearest friend, he fell for the allure of the Demon King's throne. In his greed, he sought the power to rule the world as he pleased. I considered him to be my best friend, but he never once truly thought of me as a friend. His dearest friend." My friend was jealous of my strength, of my position, of the glory that I would be able to enjoy in the future, and of all the praises that I would receive. What kind of person would the demon king of incarceration call his best friend? Amidst those final moments he betrayed me. He stabbed his knife into my back. Those who had fallen for the temptations or had been swayed by the curse also raced towards the throne that lay in front of them, but in the end the one who was sitting on the demon king's throne was my best friend who had stabbed me in the back. Just how much had that person meant to the demon king of incarceration? But his greed was endless. The desires of the demon king who now sat on that throne grew even larger. He desired eternal power. As such, he started devouring everything around him. In the end, he ended up devouring more than he could handle, so that finally, the demon king of incarceration opened his eyes. He became destruction. When the demon king of incarceration had first seen Vermouth, he had been greatly shaken by that appearance and the name Vermouth Lionheart. Vermouth was the clone of destruction born from the wound that Agaroth had inflicted on the demon king. Vermouth had had that appearance and name from the moment he was born, and it wasn't taken from someone else. This meant that the demon king of destruction's original appearance must have looked somewhat similar to Vermouth's. Then why did you become a demon king? Eugene asked haltingly as he tried not to stagger under all these revelations. How could you, after being a hero and after being betrayed, become a demon king? Even a hero would fall into corruption after experiencing such an immense betrayal, wouldn't you agree? The demon king of incarceration replied with a smile. Falling was the most natural course of action to take in that situation, and it proved to be the best and wisest choice for me personally. As a result of doing so, I managed to escape being devoured and I stayed alive. Clink, clink, clink. The sound of chains rang through the darkness once more. Eugene's eyes were now able to make out the countless chains that were flowing through the pitch-black darkness. At one end, all of these chains were wound into one huge chain connected to the chest of the demon king of incarceration. As he played with the chain connected to his chest with one hand, the demon king of incarceration continued speaking. I have been alive for a very long time. I have witnessed destruction destroying the world several times over. Everything I have experienced over that immensely long period of time grew to be too much for even myself to handle. That is why I bound all of those memories within my chains and incarcerated them here. Until now, that course of action has been enough. However, the demon king of incarceration's hand tightened around the chain. Now these memories are needed once more. The demon king of incarceration shook his head, saying, "You truly are impressive, Eugene Lionheart. You are the strongest and most outstanding hero I have ever seen in my entire life, including this version of myself from the distant past. Your companions who haven't given in to temptation, who haven't succumbed to curses, and who don't harbor any secret desires for greater power, are also amazing. Because of that, I, as the demon king, have been left with no choice but to greet you with an even greater challenge." Click, click, clink. The demon king slowly began to pull the chain out of his chest. Until today I have witnessed countless eras and worlds. And I have to admit it. Of all the countless eras and worlds that I have observed, this one is the one that has come closest to ending destruction. But that is why I must become an even greater source of despair to truly test you, the hero, in order to see whether you will truly be able to bring an end to destruction. If you are able to defeat me, the demon king of incarceration, then... Right when incarceration began to pull out the chain, the darkness around them had also started shaking. Then I might truly be able to witness the end of destruction, the demon king of incarceration finished saying. All his strength that had been sealed within this concentrated cloud of darkness had finally been released. It wasn't just dark power. All of the divine power that had been corrupted and fused with this dark power was also released. And also, there were the souls of those who the demon king of incarceration had collected from all the worlds he had lived through. The souls of those who he had once killed and those who he had once commanded. The souls that the demon king had imprisoned in this space instead of taking them with him to the next era. The demon king's chain was pulled free. Roar. The darkness was suddenly filled with rows and rows of twisted death masks, so many that they were impossible to count. In the next moment, the sight of them all being absorbed back into the demon king of incarceration almost made it look like there was a dark river that was flowing down into hell. The cloud of darkness quickly cleared. The surroundings that had previously been hidden within the darkness started to become visible once more. Eugene spotted Molin, Sienna, and the Saints. Thankfully, they didn't appear to be injured, but their expressions were filled with shock as if they had also been listening to the conversation just now. Before Eugene could think of what to say to them, he looked down at his hand. More specifically, at the divine sword that he had previously created and had been holding in his hand. He couldn't feel any light coming from the divine sword, even though he could feel his divinity still burning away. The darkness around them may have been disappearing, but it felt like something evil and ominous was still clinging to him. As he felt his fingers begin to tremble, Eugene bit down heavily on his bottom lip. Having pulled the chain out of his chest, the Demon King of Incarceration seemed to stagger on his feet, as if he was feeling a slight dizziness. Along with the Demon King's unsteady appearance, Eugene felt a sense of eeriness coming from incarceration. Eugene exchanged gazes with his comrades. There was no doubt that they were all sharing the same thought. It was dangerous. Eugene immediately grabbed his chest. It was still far from being the decisive point of this battle, but now wasn't the time to think about such things. Eugene had the gut feeling that it was impossible to deal with whatever the Demon King was doing without using ignition. Molin, Sienna, and the Saints also understood the necessity of this measure. The Saints immediately transformed into light as they returned to Eugene's side. This was so that they could reduce the burden of ignition on him while also amplifying its power. Sienna also activated the Demon Eye of Fantasy once more while holding Mary aloft. In order to buy time for their preparations, Molin charged at the Demon King of Incarceration. None of them were able to see the Demon King of Incarceration move. But he did something, and Molin was suddenly left falling forward without being able to arrest the momentum of his charge. The blood that spurted from Molin as he rolled for quite some distance splattered the dark floor with crimson streaks. Even at that moment, the Demon King of Incarceration's figure was still nowhere to be seen. Blood was spurting from Molin's neck. A large piece of flesh was torn out of Molin's throat, making it look as if he had been bitten by some kind of beast. Eugene still hadn't activated ignition. This was because Molin had collapsed at the very moment that Eugene's fingers had first plunged into his chest. Likewise, Sienna also hadn't activated her next spell. Just as Sienna began to pour the soul power that she had generated into Mary and the Demon Eye of Fantasy, Sienna's knees suddenly buckled. Before she could even open her mouth, blood was gushing out through the small gap between her closed lips. A large hole had been pierced straight through her stomach. Just like Molin, Sienna hadn't been able to respond to the attack made by the Demon King of Incarceration as he flashed right past her. "Allow me to ask you once more," the Demon King of Incarceration said as Eugene's fingers, which had been trying to grab hold of his heart, were forcibly pulled out of his chest. The Demon King of Incarceration had suddenly appeared in front of Eugene, clutching his wrist tightly. "Do you truly have no intention of giving up?" the Demon King asked once more. Creak, creak. Eugene's wrist creaked as his hand was forcibly pulled away from his chest. The eyes of the Demon King of Incarceration as he stood directly in front of Eugene were filled with a cold and calm reserve that left Eugene with an indescribably deep sense of impending doom. The Demon King asked a different question. "Have you given any thought to taking your own life?" Eugene had been prevented from activating ignition, but instead of forcefully trying to pull his hand free, Eugene swung the divine sword that he was holding in his other hand. That was his answer to the Demon King's shitty suggestion. "I see, so that really is the case," the Demon King of Incarceration sighed. Crack. In mid-swing, the divine sword shattered and dissolved into specks of black ash. The Demon King of Incarceration slowly raised his other hand and reached toward Eugene's chest. "In that case, I have no choice but to show you such despair that you are forced to give up," the Demon King said regretfully. Boom. The Demon King delivered a light tap. Eugene fell to his knees on the spot. Dark red blood spilled out from between Eugene's parted lips. Coughing slightly, Eugene weakly lifted his head as he gasped for air. The Demon King of Incarceration could have continued his assault, but instead he glared down at Eugene without doing anything. This was done to drive the hero into despair. The Demon King of Incarceration was prioritizing bringing Eugene and his comrades to the brink of despair over killing them. Was that because, after having shown them a past projection of himself in his darkest hour, he wanted them to feel the same despair he had? Eugene firmly bit his trembling lip. Then he forcefully swallowed the blood that was surging up his throat. Despair? Eugene had no desire or intention to entertain such an emotion. No matter how strong the demon king of incarceration might be, no matter how unattainable victory might seem, Eugene would never fall into despair. He would never take his own life and move on to the next era like the demon king of incarceration had suggested. He wanted to kill the demon king of incarceration. He wanted to slay the demon king of destruction. He wanted to save the world. Everything that he wanted belonged to this era. The demon king that Eugene wanted to kill first, the demon king of incarceration, was currently right in front of him, while the demon king of destruction was, at this very moment, being held back by Vermouth. The world that Eugene wanted to save was this very world, which still continued to struggle for survival even now. To be honest, something like the next world didn't at all matter to Eugene. He wanted to save the world in which the world tree had set down its roots. He wanted to save the world that had been illuminated by the light. He wanted to save his divine army, which was currently fighting on the battlefield below, as they waited for Eugene to emerge from Babel victorious. He wanted to save all of his believers from all across the continent who were currently praying for his victory on the battlefield. And he wanted to save Vermouth, who even now was being worn down to the very limits of his sanity as he held back destruction. That was why he couldn't afford to despair. Eugene wouldn't allow himself to fall into despair. Gasping for breath, Eugene forced himself onto his knees. His shattered internal organs churned as they pieced themselves back together. Eugene felt grateful that he had managed to get his hands on a level of regeneration that was close to immortality. Because if he hadn't been able to heal from these wounds, he wouldn't have been able to keep fighting. "You're still trying to stand?" The demon king of incarceration voiced an observation. Crack. Eugene wasn't able to see this attack coming either. However, once it had hit him, he was forced to register the blow even if he didn't want to. Eugene had just been struck by a sweeping kick that broke both of his legs and sent him rolling across the floor. "Don't you realize that it's all meaningless?" the demon king of incarceration chided. After rolling on the ground a few more times, Eugene managed to grab hold of the ground with his hands, arresting his roll. His back teeth were so tightly clenched together that his whole mouth was filled with the taste of his blood. Despite the pain, Eugene glared up at the demon king of incarceration with bloodshot eyes. "It doesn't matter how many times you get back up," the demon king sneered. "Eugene Lionheart, you will never be able to fulfill any of your desires. And what meaning is there in a hero who is unable to overcome the challenge of a demon king such as myself?" Eugene silently attempted to get back onto his feet. The demon king of incarceration slowly walked over while saying, "You will find no victory in this battle, nor in this war. No matter how hard you try to keep from falling into despair, in the end, the fact that you will never be able to win will rob you of all your hope." Crack crack cracker crack. The demon king of incarceration's right hand balled up into a fist. "In the first place, Eugene Lionheart, what you desire is impossible. That thing that has destroyed the world so many times over has, by now, become a cataclysm that can no longer be considered as just another demon king. It is the death that all eras must face. Just as all humans must someday grow old and die, it has become the end that defines the lifespan of the world." Eugene stared at the demon king of incarceration's fist with bloodshot eyes. He was keeping all of his focus on it because he needed to be able to see it moving. Everything that he originally was has been consumed by ravenous greed, the demon king spat angrily. Unable to be satisfied with just a demon king's throne, he coveted an even greater power and ended up consuming everything that existed, even his own ego, until the only thing remaining was that desire to consume. That is what finally ended up becoming destruction. And that hunger will never reach its end. The fist moved. "Don't you think that I would have already ended destruction if I could have? I am the one who hates destruction more than anyone else, and I have long yearned to bring an end to it." Incarceration paused in lingering regret. "If I had only managed to complete my duty as the hero, if I hadn't allowed my comrades to betray me, if I could have just slain my comrades with my own hands before they succumbed to temptation, were maddened by a curse, or were blinded by their own jealousy." Crunch. Eugene's heart was pounded deep into his chest. His breath caught in his throat and his vision shook as he was thrown backward. Then a new demon king would never have been born, the demon king of incarceration sighed. "No one would have sat down on that throne. In the eternities that I have lived through since that moment, can you imagine just how many times I have regretted my failures during that moment?" Eugene hunched over as he hacked for breath. The prayers screamed by the saints in their panic ran through his head. His injuries were already being regenerated at high speed. However, the attacks from the Demon King of Incarceration were too fast and heavy for his regeneration to keep up. I have gone through these cycles of regret and hatred over and over again, desperately hoping to end destruction that was born from my failures. However, I have never been able to bring an end to it. The world continues to be destroyed and reborn anew, and no god has ever been able to save their world, the Demon King of Incarceration said as he began to approach Eugene once more. With the accompanying sound of a sharp scream, Eugene's right wing flashed. Anise, who had transformed back into her angel form, leaped towards the Demon King of Incarceration. When my world was destroyed, the angels also screamed as they died. Incarceration calmly observed. Just like you are now, Anise Slywood. Anise's body froze in midair. A dark, deathly aura that had been shaped into the form of a hand was now clenched around Anise's throat. Anise struggled as she clutched at the hand that was choking her by the neck. I fell from grace after denying those gods who could neither stop destruction nor save the world, the Demon King of Incarceration sneered. Chaining myself to that fool and his throne while he was still in the process of transforming into destruction as he suffered from a hunger that refused to abate no matter how much he ate and ate, I used that connection to take my own seat on that throne. Boom. The deathly aura shaped like a hand slammed Anise into the ground. Christina was no longer able to keep up her stream of prayers. She also transformed into the form of an angel with a desperate yell as she stood in front of Eugene and spread her wings protectively. That is how I was reborn as the Demon King of Incarceration. But why do you think I chose to become a Demon King? It was because I couldn't allow myself to die. Because I needed to take responsibility for my failure. Because someone had to be there to create something in the wake of destruction. Incarceration paused before continuing. So after everyone and everything in the world was destroyed in a world where nothing living remained, I, on my own, restarted everything from the very beginning. Anise, who was still lying on the floor, reached out with a trembling hand to grab hold of the Demon King of Incarceration's ankle. Bam! The kick she was met with caused the light to fade from Anise's eyes. Without sparing further attention to Anise, Incarceration continued. I raised the land from beneath the waves that had covered everything and carved out the mountains. I released the souls that I had previously incarcerated and restored the circulation of life force. Once living beings and civilization began to emerge into this new world, I resumed my role as the Demon King and retreated into the darkness to wait for the return of destruction. This cycle has repeated itself over and over again. In order to ensure that the world was never completely destroyed, I have repeatedly created the next era of the world. Christina's eyes shook as she resolutely remained standing in front of Eugene. If those words were true, then, despite being a Demon King, the Demon King of Incarceration had actually been playing the role of the creator god. With the continuous destruction of each new era, that thing has completed its transformation into the very concept of destruction, but the chain that I tied to it at the very beginning still remains intact. Thanks to that, I will never die at the hands of destruction, but neither am I able to slay destruction. The Demon King of Incarceration said with a sigh, as such I have been forced to compromise. Without being able to end destruction, I have been forced to accept the role of destruction while continuously moving on to the next era. Ewa. With a bestial roar, Molan rose to his feet. Blood was still pouring down from his torn-open throat, but instead of covering up the wound, Molan leaped onto the Demon King of Incarceration's back. That is why I am telling you now, what you desire is impossible. Sometimes, when things are impossible, you need to accept the truth and compromise, the Demon King said, even as his hands caught the thick pair of arms that came flying in from behind him as they tried to wrap around his body. Compared to Molan's muscular arms, the Demon King of Incarceration's hands seemed almost small, but when he started to clench his fingers, Molan's muscles and bones were easily crushed under the pressure of his grip. After breaking both of his arms, the Demon King of Incarceration threw Molan to the side. You say that you are going to kill destruction? While still insisting that you also want to save Vermouth. That simply isn't viable. You also claim that you are going to save the world by killing me? That too is an impossibility. The only reason that the current world still exists is because I am the one who created it, declared the Demon King of Incarceration. Sienna staggered to her feet. She covered her punctured abdomen with one hand as she filled in her wound, biting down on her bloody lips to distract herself from the pain. Clutched in her trembling grip, Mary was pointed at the demon king of incarceration. The soul power concentrated on the tip of the staff erupted into a spell. Boom. However, even a spell of such power was easily scattered with a gesture from the demon king of incarceration. The deathly aura transformed into a streak of lighting at incarceration's command and pierced through Sienna's abdomen once more. Sienna's body collapsed forward as Mary and the demon eye of fantasy fell to the floor. I applaud your determination and solidarity, but the hope you cling to just feels like stubbornness to me. Just how much longer can you keep it up? The demon king of incarceration asked with idle curiosity. Still struggling to catch his breath, Eugene stepped forward to stand in front of Christina. Startled, Christina tried to stop Eugene, but instead he pushed Christina behind him. Just how much longer? Do you intend to put up such pointless, worthless, and ignorant resistance? The demon king of incarceration demanded, a note of anger entering his voice. Just how long will you insist on being so greedy and stubborn? Until I defeat you, Eugene quietly responded. The corner of the demon king of incarceration's cheek twitched in anger at these words. For a moment, the demon king of incarceration felt a surge of genuine annoyance and rage. It seems that it will be difficult to drive you to despair, incarceration said with a sigh. In that case, even if it means that your soul will end up somewhat damaged, I have no choice but to kill you. Eugene's legs moved forward. He brought his arms up to defend himself. Until now, he still hadn't been able to catch any of the demon king of incarceration's movements. If he couldn't see them, he couldn't react to them. He couldn't stop the attacks. He couldn't avoid them. He couldn't even get a grip on the demon king, nor could he get any of his own attacks in. Eugene couldn't allow things to go on like this. Anise and Molen had been pinned to the ground. Sienna had also collapsed and seemed incapable of getting back up. The situation was turning out the same as it had 300 years ago when Hamel hadn't even been able to make it to the top of the Demon King's palace. However, unlike 300 years ago, the Demon King of incarceration wouldn't just stop there. Vermouth wasn't here, and there was nothing that could motivate the Demon King of incarceration into making another oath. Eugene also had no intention of relying on something like that oath to end this battle. For Vermouth's sake, for Sienna's sake, for Molen's sake, for Anisa's sake, and for Christina's sake, for the god of giants and the other ancient gods who had fused together into the light, and for the sage who had transformed herself into the world tree, for his family, for the Lionhearts, and for the whole world. The only outcome that Eugene would accept here was his complete victory. He needed a miracle. He had to come up with a miracle. He could hear all of their wishes. The prayers of his believers were still finding their way to him. He couldn't fall here. He couldn't allow himself to be defeated. He must not fall into despair. I will definitely. freewebnovel.com. The Demon King of incarceration moved, but time and space suddenly seemed to disappear. Eugene could see the result of the Demon King's attack, a fist that tore its way through his chest and crushed his heart. In a single moment he glimpsed the future that was about to occur. This time he managed to see through the Demon King's movements. So Eugene moved. That hump. Eugene leaped over the Demon King of incarceration's fist. The irritation and rage that had been on incarceration's face was washed away by surprise. It was as if the Demon King couldn't have ever imagined that Eugene would actually manage to avoid his attack just now. This surprise couldn't be helped. The current Demon King of incarceration had released himself from all of the chains that were usually binding him. Freeing himself from his restrictions, the Demon King of incarceration had unleashed his full power. Ever since Vermouth had come to him 300 years ago, swearing to break the eternal cycle that they were both trapped in, the Demon King of incarceration had been storing up his vast reserves of dark power as well as the immortal life force that had kept him alive over the eternities. His purpose for storing up these reserves of energy was to prepare for the creation of the next era. But the Demon King of incarceration was now sacrificing a part of these reserves in order to ensure absolute certainty. Thus, the Demon King was certain that there was no way he could lose this battle. But that certainty had now been partially shaken. The definite outcome of his actions that had had no room for error had been altered. In that moment of stopped time, the Demon King of incarceration's eyes had met with Eugene's. A light was sparkling deep within Eugene's bloodshot eyes. It was the light of hope that could never have shone amidst despair. I finally saw through it, Eugene gasped out. The light in his eyes transformed into a divine glow. The embers that had been about to die out flared into life once more as the flames of hope reignited. The clinging darkness could no longer cover up and snuff out his light. That hump. Eugene took a step forward. Whoosh. Even his dimly glowing wings burst back into light. His outspread wings formed the shape of a halo that illuminated the darkness. The spreading rays of light swept over Molan and Anise. Under this light, their broken bones and torn muscles were reconnected. Their closed eyes eventually opened as the two staggered back onto their feet. "You saw through it?" The Demon King of Incarceration repeated, the surprise having disappeared from his face. Pulling back his fists that had paused midair, Incarceration continued speaking, "Do you really believe that?" The moment that the Demon King finished asking that question, his fist seemed to disappear. In that instant, Eugene's field of view felt like it had been drastically widened as he tried to see where the Demon King of Incarceration's attack was about to land. The rapid attack that had been completely untraceable just a few short moments ago was now somewhat visible, if only slightly. To be more precise, Eugene's divine senses were now able to detect the point of impact right before the blow actually landed. Eugene still couldn't see through the trajectory of the Demon King's attacks just yet. However, by detecting the point of impact, he would at least be able to come up with some sort of response instead of helplessly allowing himself to be hit as he had been before. It was with that thought that Eugene raised his arms. "Fuck," Eugene swore as he immediately felt regret. He might be able to see it coming, but it was the height of arrogance to think that he would be able to easily deal with the attack. The divine sword that Eugene had tried to use to block the point of impact exploded in a burst of light as the arm that he had only belatedly managed to regenerate was broken and torn to pieces once more. As Eugene leaped backward in retreat, the Demon King of Incarceration let out a snort. "It seems you have managed to see something," the Demon King of Incarceration accepted. Being able to react perfectly to the blow was a completely different story from just being able to see it coming. Yet the Demon King of Incarceration couldn't help but feel surprised by the fact that Eugene had managed to see anything. The fact that his speed, which Eugene hadn't been able to keep up with, was slowly becoming visible to the hero meant that even now Eugene Lionheart is still growing stronger as this battle goes on, the Demon King of Incarceration realized. Could Eugene really have adapted to the Demon King's speed sometime during the continuous attacks? Incarceration could have accepted that Eugene would slightly be able to adjust to his speed after seeing it a few times. However, the Demon King of Incarceration still believed that there was such a gap between their strengths that it would have been impossible for Eugene to overcome it. The Demon King of Incarceration felt unnerved by the fact that Eugene seemed to be narrowing the gap between them by growing stronger and unlocking more of his potential. But it seemed that the Demon King of Incarceration had no choice but to acknowledge this revelation as well. Eugene Lionheart's most overwhelming strength was actually his ability to grow. The fact that he had been able to reach such a level in just a few years wasn't simply because he was the reincarnation of Agaroth and Hamel. The Demon King of Incarceration mused, "Does he grow stronger every time he surpasses his limits?" But Eugene wasn't the only one. Right now, in this battle against the Demon King of Incarceration, Eugene wasn't fighting on his own. Molan's bellows shook the darkness. Although he was covered in such grievous wounds that it wouldn't be strange for him to have already died several times over, Molan still rose up, almost as if he was an undead, and charged at the Demon King of Incarceration. Even if he hadn't truly died, having been pushed to the very brink of death, Molan should have been experiencing great terror and agony right at this very moment, but there were no such emotions in Molan's eyes. The only thing burning in his eyes was hostility and murderous intent directed at the Demon King of Incarceration. As Eugene's greatest warrior and incarnation, Molan found himself linked to the heightened level of senses that Eugene had managed to reach. Molan, who had been rushing forward with a fierce roar, felt as if time had started slowing down around him as his senses grew sharper. Molan intuitively felt that this wasn't just his illusion or a fantasy but was a real phenomenon. Even with this slowing down of time, the Demon King of Incarceration's attack was still terrifyingly fast, but Molan's finely honed senses were able to foretell the target of Incarceration's attack. Molan didn't try to avoid the blow. He didn't even put up any defenses. Instead, he met the Demon King's attack with his own attack. Rather than swinging his axe, Molan recklessly threw his fist at the oncoming blow. Crack-a-growl. It sounded as if the world itself was shattering into pieces. The muscles of Molin's arm bulged to the extreme before bursting explosively, and his fist was shattered into pieces. But even then Molin refused to back down. And despite having shattered Molin's fist with his punch, the Demon King's fist also found itself unable to advance any further. There was definitely the sensation that the Demon King's attack had been blocked. Hamel, just what on earth have you done? Anise, who had transformed back into a wing of light, asked in surprise. I didn't do anything, Eugene spat out as he turned to look accusingly at Sienna. Sienna met Eugene's gaze as she was getting back up after having regenerated her wounds. Now that things have reached this point, you should start earning your keep, Eugene demanded as his eyes slid down to stare at the demon eye of fantasy. Ah! A sound of laughter that Eugene had previously heard in his nightmares rang inside Eugene's head. Open Bookworm and Danthman's Thoughts Chapter 588. The Demon King of Incarceration 9. Sienna let out a deep sigh as she pulled the demon eye of fantasy free from her robes. As she did this, the flow of time was distorted. Just like how the Demon King of Incarceration had dragged them out of reality into his dreamscape for a few short moments, Eugene and Sienna had also now been absorbed into the same dream thanks to the power of the demon eye of fantasy. Within this gap of a few frozen moments in time, caught in the middle of a dream that was far removed from reality, Eugene tilted his head to the side as he glared at Sienna. Eugene's immediate reaction to this new situation was to question Sienna. Are you insane? Although his tone was sharp and accusatory, Sienna was unable to defend herself and could only hunch her shoulders in meek shame. I did think that perhaps just maybe you might do something like this, but I didn't think that you would actually go through with it, Eugene said with a sigh of exasperation. Are you planning on becoming a necromancer as well? Sienna stammered guiltily. That's putting things a bit too harshly. Even though you know how much I hate black wizards. Eugene snorted and cut her off. Oh really? Are you actually saying that when you were very passionate about studying black magic? That's... Sienna yelped. That's because black magic is still just magic in the end. Also, Eugene, you should know full well that even black magic has many different types of magic. Do you really think that I would be crazy enough to try and learn necromancy? So then why did you do what you did? Eugene shouted angrily. It wasn't like there weren't any precedents for Sienna's crimes. 300 years ago, when the Demon King of Incarceration had returned Hamel's soul that had been harvested after his death because of Belial's curse, Sienna had sealed Hamel's soul into a necklace despite her comrade's objections. She had done so to ensure that once they had managed to slay the Demon King of Incarceration and the Demon King of Destruction, Hamel would safely reincarnate into a world free of the Demon Kings. Of course, that was a completely different reincarnation from the one that Vermouth had been planning, so he had ended up taking the necklace from her, but, in any case, it was a fact that in the past Sienna had once captured his soul. Now, you both should calm down, said a voice laden with amusement. Eugene unconsciously squeezed his eyes shut to avoid looking at the source of the sound. Why did you do it? Eugene eventually spat out, his eyes still tightly clenched shut. Seeing Eugene react like this to that voice, Sienna couldn't help but feel an instinctive surge of annoyance. Even a snot-nosed brat would be able to see that Eugene was currently feeling extremely agitated and emotionally confused. There are two reasons for what I did, Sienna confessed. First of all, I didn't have the confidence that I could perfectly control the demon eye of fantasy. I was sure that I could roughly work out how to use it, but I decided that I simply didn't have enough time to really familiarize myself with it, which would prevent me from being able to push it to its limits. And your other reason? Eugene prompted. Sienna took a deep breath and said, I didn't like the idea of her leaving you with regrets and nightmares for the rest of your life. Eugene stayed silent in the face of this open confession. I'm sure you would insist that everything is fine and that you would eventually get used to the guilt, Sienna said with a sigh. And Anise, Christina, and I are confident that we could erase any lingering regrets you might have. However, when it comes to human emotions, such things can never truly be wiped away completely. Eugene frowned when he heard her reply. So what? For me to not have any regrets, you actually went and trapped her soul inside that thing? So that whenever I feel some slight pangs of regret, you can pull her out and let us have a short chat. Is that right? If you were just going to do that, then we might as well not even have killed her in the first place. It's totally different. Sienna suddenly shouted. Just what kind of impression do you even have of me? Do you really think that I, Lady Sienna, would trap her departed soul just to play around with it. Is that what you think of me? Sienna was panting for breath as she stomped on the ground in anger. After taking a few moments to compose herself, Sienna suddenly declared, "Once everything is over, I am going to marry you." Eugene's jaw dropped in shock. "What?" "I said that I am going to marry you," Sienna loudly repeated herself. "As for Anise and Christina, well, if they also want to join in, I might be willing to accommodate them." Freewebnovel.com. Eugene looked perplexed. What are you even saying?" Sienna interrupted him. "After that, I am going to shove her soul into a familiar." At this, Eugene was left gaping silently. Sienna just continued, "I am going to shove her soul into the body of the most hideous and shitty-looking familiar that I can find. Then I am going to put a leash around her neck and tie her up in the front yard of our new home to act as our new guard dog." Was Sienna currently even in her right mind? Because by doing so, there won't be any reasons left for you to have nightmares about her. Sienna passionately explained. "When you see the ugly face of that little bitch tied up in front of our new home, you'll never have nightmares about her ever again. Even if you transform me into a hideous familiar, I will still be me," Noor suddenly spoke up. She had been standing in front of Eugene with her cheeks puffed out in a pout. "In the first place, isn't the fact that you plan on leashing me up like that proof enough that you're afraid of me? What does that have to do with anything?" Sienna protested. "It's the reason why you won't just destroy my soul or allow me to be reincarnated someday. Although there's no guarantee that all of my memories will remain intact once that day comes." Noor suddenly laughed smugly. Between Hamel and I there exists a very deep bond of fate. When the day comes that I am finally reincarnated, I will surely be able to remember my dear Hamel." Noor refused to move away from Eugene. She just kept staring at Eugene's face with a sweet smile. "The fact that you want to make me into a hideous familiar, isn't that because you're afraid of the fate that ties Hamel and me together?" Noor shot Sienna a challenging look. Sienna just glared at Noor without responding. Naturally, Sienna didn't feel any such fear. To be honest, she really did plan to transform Noor into a familiar for a certain length of time, but she didn't necessarily feel the obsession to place the ghost into a particularly ugly mutt. Once Eugene had managed to completely overcome his nightmares and shed off any remaining emotions of regret and guilt, Sienna would be willing to let go of Noir's soul cleanly. However, if she admitted to such an intention, wouldn't her plans just end up being twisted by Noir's nonsense? "There's no need to turn her into a familiar," Eugene finally said, letting out a deep sigh. "I understand and accept that you did what you did to prepare for today's battle, and for my sake as well. However, I really don't need a familiar like that. So just, once everything is over, just release her soul." "All right," Sienna replied with a sulky pout. Since Eugene had agreed to compromise to that extent, it only made sense for her to restrain her pride. "In any case, just how long do you plan on ignoring me?" Noor questioned as she slowly reached out to him. Eugene quickly stepped back, avoiding the approaching hand. Noor simply stepped forward in pursuit. "You know that I'm right in front of you, Hamel. It's me, Noor Giabella. The same Noor Giabella who you stabbed in the heart, gave one last kiss, and sent off with an expression that looked like you were going to burst into tears." Eugene silently closed his eyes. "Are you acting like this because our reunion is so awkward and embarrassing for you? Could it be that the taste of my lips from back then hasn't faded yet?" That necklace, I see that you're still keeping it with you," Noor proudly noticed. "Get lost," Eugene growled. "If you were just going to give me such a response, what's the point of you keeping your eyes closed and trying to ignore me? Besides, Hamel, it's not like I'm in a position to get lost, even if I wanted to. Do you really think that, if it were up to me, I would want to reunite with you like this?" Noor pointed out as she turned her head slightly to shoot Sienna a sideways glance. "I'm sure that you already know this, but I have to say I was already extremely satisfied with my death. It was the perfect death that I had always been hoping for. Because we really did end up almost destroying each other, and I was able to leave you with such strong emotions when I died." Eugene silently recalled those last moments. "So why did things end up like this in the end?" "It's all because that mean-spirited witch cruelly decided to use my soul as a tool, all of her own volition." As such, Noor paused as her hand approached Eugene once more. "You should open your eyes and look at me, Hamel. And in any case, all of this is only taking place within a brief nightmare." Her slowly moving hand caressed Eugene's cheek. Eugene let out another deep sigh as he finally opened his eyes. He looked straight at Noir, who appeared no different from when she was alive. Seeing her like this, he couldn't help but feel a complex mix of emotions. Ah, Noir laughed with a bright smile on her face. Boom boom boom. The nightmare started shaking. Sienna turned to look around at their surroundings in alarm, but Noir wasn't surprised by this. Taking back the hand that had been caressing Eugene's cheek, Noir explained, "This dream is collapsing. It might have been a different story if we were still in my territory, but I can't keep this dream up for so long in this place." "That makes sense," Eugene said with a slight nod. "I tried to pull the Demon King of Incarceration into the nightmare as well, but it didn't work out too well. His heart is deeper than any abyss, and the reality that he has lived through is far more terrifying and despair-inducing than any nightmare. The demon eye of fantasy wasn't able to instill any terror into him," Noir admitted. As expected, Eugene nodded once more as he responded in a calm voice. No matter how often the demon eye of fantasy was repeatedly activated, it wouldn't be enough to even slightly shake the Demon King of Incarceration's consciousness. Instead, it was Sienna who had caught a glimpse of the abyss dwelling within the Demon King of Incarceration, who had experienced a wavering in her emotional stability. Noir frowned in concern as she voiced her thoughts. "Although it's funny for me, who has already died, to say something like this, I'm afraid this situation seems quite hopeless, Hamel. The Demon King of Incarceration still has a lot of strength, which he's holding in reserve. Hamel, it seems that you have managed to adjust slightly to the Demon King of Incarceration's strength, but even so, I can't imagine you defeating the Demon King." Eugene just snorted. "You weren't even able to imagine your own death. However, you still died in the end. And I'm the one who killed you. And what an ecstatic death it was," Noir said with a smile as she continued to caress his chest. Even now that she was already dead, she could still vividly picture that moment. "Whether or not you can imagine something, that doesn't have any bearing on what I need to do," Eugene insisted. "You said that this situation seems hopeless?" "I know that. However, I don't feel hopeless." "So you think that you can win?" Noir asked him. "No," Eugene said as he shook his head. "I know that I have to win." He was far from confident in his victory. But that didn't mean there was any reason for him to despair. The only thing that Eugene needed to do was to pour all of his strength into attempting to kill the Demon King of Incarceration. He had to fight with the full intent of defeating the Demon King of Incarceration. "If that is what you desire," Noir said as she slowly raised her hand. A purple gem, the demon eye of fantasy, suddenly appeared in her hand. Noir chuckled as she lifted the jewel to her eye. "As someone who has already passed, I, the Queen of the Night Demons, will do my best to help you realize your wish," Noir promised. The purple gem glowed with light and melted into Noir's eye. At the same time, the nightmare had completely collapsed around them. Their minds, which had been temporarily absorbed into the nightmare, returned to reality. The scene they returned to was of Molan and the Demon King's fists meeting in midair. "This feeling of having one of my blows blocked," the Demon King thought with a bright smile. He briefly enjoyed this sensation that he hadn't felt in a long time before saying in a low voice, "It seems that wasn't just any ordinary dream." The Demon King's whispered observation wasn't directed at Molan. But instead of responding to those words, Eugene spread his wings and leaped forward. Badump. Just as he was approaching the Demon King of Incarceration, Eugene felt a pulse of divine power wash over him. Eugene flinched in surprise and turned his head to look backward. Sienna, who was holding Mary aloft, also had a puzzled expression on her face. The demon eye of fantasy had started floating in midair, all on its own. A hazy phantasm was gradually taking shape around it as Sienna's soul power was drawn into it. "Oh my God!" Anise let out a cry. There was no way that the saint would ever be able to forget that figure. It was Noor Giabella. The Queen of the Night Demons, who was supposed to have died, had suddenly appeared next to Sienna. Moreover, her current appearance. Sienna shouted in anger, "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm turning myself into an angel," Noor whispered. "Since you claim to be the goddess of magic, shouldn't you have at least a single angel serving you?" Sienna bit her lip. "Who asked you to go and do that on your own?" Noor reminded her. "You're the one who said that you'd be using me as your tool, Sienna Meridian. So there's no need for you to feel so angry about it. After all, resonating with you like this should be the most helpful thing I can do right now." Noir's eyes shone with the light of the demon eye of fantasy. At the same time, Sienna also understood what Noir was attempting to do. Noir had once attempted to ascend to the throne of an evil god in her previous life and had successfully managed to attain divine power by stepping into the realm of a demon king as a mere night demon. Resonating with Noir would only further enhance Sienna's divine status. Thanks to that, Sienna's miracles could actually be cast through the demon eye of fantasy. Boom boom boom. The palace shook. Sienna's will reinforced Eugene's light as they worked together to drive back the darkness around them. The soul power she had been wielding was also infused with the force of her divinity. The two disparate types of divine powers didn't clash with each other but instead blended together into one. Both Eugene's and Sienna's holy domains somehow fused together to suppress the demon king of incarceration. This feeling, Eugene recognized it. Even as he was feeling astonished, Eugene immediately raised his divine sword. Their two holy domains had fused together and became one. Then through the demon eye of fantasy, Sienna's miracle had been cast to warp reality. They might have still been within the demon king of incarceration's palace, but Eugene and Sienna's holy domains had been overlaid on top of it, and reality itself began to straddle the line between dreams and fantasy. In a blaze of divine flames, a crystal blade appeared in midair. There could be no mistaking it. Eugene let out an amused snort as he continued to pour out his divine flames. It was the divine moonlight sword Levantian. The sword that had previously been embedded in Eugene's chest had appeared anew. And it didn't just stop at just a single sword. In response to Eugene's desire, the holy domain that had been enhanced by the demon eye of fantasy miraculously realized his wish as more crystal swords appeared. The number of Levantians continued to increase. But it still wasn't enough. Eugene's head was growing dizzy and the taste of blood had filled his mouth. Blood was also flowing down from his nose. The saints, who were still resonating with him, also swallowed back their groans as they helped to shoulder Eugene's burden. He needed even more swords, and they needed to be even stronger than the heights that Eugene had managed to reach during the nightmare that had once trapped him when he entered Giabella City. Something like this would have been impossible in reality, but it should be possible in a place like this. There were now dozens of Levantians floating in the air. But Eugene still desired more than just that. Whoosh! All of the crystal blades erupted in flames. Then the flames began to overlay on top of each other. As the growing blaze transformed into multiple multi-layered empty swords, the heat grew so intense that even the crystal blades began to warp. The demon king of incarceration couldn't help but unconsciously let out his laughter at this sight. He knew that the dozens of Levantians currently aimed at him were definitely not some kind of illusion. At least within the confines of this space, all of those swords were the real deal. Even Molin, who was still blocking the demon king of incarceration's advance, felt dumbfounded by the absurdity of this scene, but he immediately grasped the situation and leaped over to stand next to Eugene. How impressive, the demon king of incarceration muttered with an amused smile. All of the Levantians suddenly launched themselves at the demon king of incarceration. All of their power, strong enough that it wouldn't be strange if it destroyed the world several times over, was all focused on the demon king of incarceration. The demon king of incarceration didn't retreat. Instead, his smile grew even wider as he stepped forward to meet the Levantians' bombardment. Enough power to destroy the world several times over? Something like that wouldn't give the demon king of incarceration any reason to back down. The demon king of incarceration had become used to acts of destruction far more terrible than this one. He had seen this world destroyed so many times. His fist simply shattered apart the flames.